Hello everyone, I'm Ryan from Fireside Knicks with my friend and co-host Dylan Backer, and in today's video we're going to be talking about RJ Barrett, who I think is probably the most interesting player to look at this offseason. Now, is he the most likely guy to get moved? Definitely not. We talked about Obi Toppin. I think that's kind of the consensus. Like, if there were a guy to get moved from like the rotation, it would be him. But RJ Barrett's definitely an interesting player. He's coming off of a down year in the regular season, had flashes of brilliance in the postseason. It felt like, RJ Barrett kind of found something for a little bit there, but is it a large enough sample size for you to justify, giving him a larger role and giving him that same leash? Like, what is his role in the offense going forward? We saw how he worked with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle, while Julius Randle stepped up his game from his previous season when working with Jalen Brunson. RJ Barrett didn't. So, there are questions about fit. The Knicks need more spacing. RJ Barrett's shooting regressed heavily last year, and not saying he was a bad shooter, the year prior to this year, but it did get worse from his second year. But all things considered, there are some questions and some pretty important dialogue to be had about RJ Barrett, and I'm really interested to kind of get your thoughts on that. Guys, if you guys want to be involved in the discussion, you can always tweet at us at Fireside Knicks. You guys can check out the comment section. You guys can definitely get a conversation started there. And without further ado, Dylan, how are you doing today, my friend? And, what do you really feel about RJ Barrett's season and kind of how the Knicks are going to handle him over this offseason?
Right, so, when we graded RJ Barrett's season, I think we made it pretty clear that we thought it was pretty inconsistent and that it just was not a good season for RJ Barrett standards. For most other players, 19 points a game on 44 or 43% from the field, something like that, is an okay season, right? But for RJ Barrett, that's a downturn. It's a downturn, especially after what he did in the second half of the 2021-22 season. So looking at that, obviously there are questions now to be had of whether he can truly fit with Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle together. The spacing issue, like you said, it's kind of important to have a good three that can defend and shoot. Barrett took a step back defensively, and he obviously took a huge step back on the shooting. So that's something to really be concerned about. And, the way I see it with like a trade or anything like that, this is the way I see it. If the Knicks are going to make like a trade for like a star, an all-star level player, or even like a superstar, RJ Barrett's going to be one of the first names that's going to be thrown in the negotiation table. He's going to be. He's a young player. He's 22 years old. He's on a $30 million a year contract. Some teams might be willing to take it, and some teams will see what he did in the playoffs and be like, okay, maybe we can make this guy consistent throughout the regular season and even in the postseason if they were to get there. And also too, I think I should emphasize this. During the regular season, it seemed like, RJ Barrett and trading was becoming more apparent of needed. But when the playoffs happened and he stepped up in the playoffs, it became like, okay, maybe they can figure something out with RJ, but maybe they might not be able to still, just because it was that inconsistent in the regular season that it becomes a question now of, do you want to take that risk to hope that he just figures it out for the long term and actually can be consistent? Because we know for the first 4 years that RJ Barrett's career, he's been, throughout the regular season, it's been inconsistent. It just has been. He's always gotten off to slow starts. He's had those stretches where he just can't score, can't make shots. And then he'll have those stretches where you can't guard him at all, and he just hits everything. He makes all those shots. He gets more aggressive. I'm not saying RJ's a bad player by any means. No, I think he's a fantastic player for his age. But in terms of his fit on the Knicks with like Brunson and Randle, who in my opinion it seems like they're clearly like the big duo that like meshes well together, it becomes like a question of, does RJ actually fit here? Especially with the lack of spacing and the fact that his best scoring abilities come from inside, which is also what Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle do. So it's like, does he really mesh with these guys? Because like the way I see it, they're like big trio. It feels almost more like at this point it's just Brunson and Randle is the big duo, and then RJ's kind of just, he's there. He's the complementary third piece, but he's not like the third star, if that makes sense. And that's not saying that RJ is like bad again. No, it's just like we thought by now he would be like an all-star. And unfortunately, he's not an all-star. It doesn't look like he's like on the path to really get there. It just looks like he's on the path to become like a normal rotation player, but nothing much more else than that. So it brings a question, like I said, if he should get traded or not. And like I said, if they were to trade him, I think you got to do it for like a superstar or an all-star. It has to be for a substantial upgrade, because RJ is a good player. You can't just trade RJ for pocket change. You got to be able to trade him for something that will actually get the Knicks to like being a finals contender, an upgrade. What do you think about all that?
Yeah, no, I think that the issue with RJ Barrett stems more so with fit and just kind of where the Knicks are at in terms of their roster. Interestingly enough, and I think this is a good point that some people make. RJ Barrett's never been given the opportunity to be the first option on this Knicks team at any point in his career. The reason for that is that, Julius Randle in the beginning, took most of the shots. RJ was a rookie. Then in year two, Julius Randle goes out and he's an all NBA player. I think he was second all NBA that season. Then you look at year three, takes a step back. Everyone kind of as a team takes a step back, but Randle was coming into that season as number one option. Towards the end, Barrett became the number one option. But, and then in the year four, Jalen Brunson, new guy in town, he becomes the number one option. Randle makes third team All NBA, so he became the second option, even though scoring numbers point more towards Randle being the number one option. But I think you and I can agree, in late game situations, Brunson was that guy, and I think that makes him, in my opinion, the number one option on the team. But yeah, with all that being said, realistically speaking, can you really look at this Knicks roster? Can you really look at the Knicks as a whole? Can you really look at, the scoring diet, the shot diet, the amount of shots and minutes they have available and say that RJ Barrett can go out and try to be a number one option? He can't. It's not going to work in this offense. And you mentioned the postseason. It conveniently enough came with Julius Randle either A, not being in the lineup or being limited, right? And I'm not saying that Julius Randle makes RJ Barrett worse, but more so that, when the roles are a little less clear for RJ Barrett, I think it's going to naturally create disruption for any player, but I think it does more so for RJ Barrett. And you mentioned the spacing, the defense, those things regressed this year, and those are things you want from that position, especially with this starting lineup. If Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle are your first and second options, those are not great defensive players. Randle, again, has a physical component to him that allows him to not be a complete liability there, but Jalen Brunson is a smaller guard who isn't a great defensive player, so he's going to be someone that defenses, offenses are going to look to attack, so you need someone that can help him, right? That's why Grimes starts, and that's why Hart is the only other guy outside of maybe Quickly that you would start at that two guard spot, and it's for the defense. So, as you mentioned, the spacing as well. If Barrett can't space the floor, now, things get a little tighter. You don't have the paint as open. Mitchell Robinson's definitely not spacing. And, we talked about, could the Knicks potentially look at, adding more spacing to the center position? Sure, but are you really going to get rid of Mitchell Robinson just to get shooting? You have to get a substantial upgrade. This team's in a position to try to compete, and, are you going to be sacrificing defense, right? Like, people can argue, we want this center or that center. Like, I get it. Karl Anthony Towns is the big guy for some people. We've made it very clear we don't want him, but, try to have Karl Anthony Towns defend Joel Embiid, right? People can make fun of Joel Embiid for being a second-round exit, but here's the thing. The Knicks are not in a position to start making fun of second-round exits. So, they have to prove that they can get to a conference finals, because they haven't been to one in our lifetimes. So, with that being said, all of this considered, when you're looking at where the Knicks are with that three spot, right? If you're looking at what RJ Barrett needs to get better with going forward, how do you think is the path for RJ Barrett? We talk about trade situations or whatever that may be. The path towards him being here for at least next year. Like, what does that look like for RJ Barrett? What does he have to do? What numbers should people be looking at for upgrades or improvement for him as he enters year 5 of his career, really the biggest year of his career as a New York Knick?
Right, so, it's obvious at this point that RJ is the third option. You're not going to take touches away from Brunson or Randle, provided Randle is still on the team, of course, but I expect him to be, so I'm just going to talk as if he will be. But with that being said, the thing that RJ needs to improve on the most, I think it's pretty clear. Shooting. He's obviously been a good finisher. We know how good he is at that. We know he's been pretty efficient at the rim, but shooting has just been such like a inconsistent downward spiral. I mean, he started the year this past season like, what was it, like 1 for 18 from 3 or something like that, like some really bad number, really bad figure, and then throughout the season it was kind of just like, he had some games where he couldn't miss threes, but then he had many games where he just couldn't buy a bucket from outside, right? If you want to be a good like wing player in this league, you got to be able to shoot. It's as simple as that. And with the Knicks' lack of spacing as it is, he has to be able to shoot. I've always criticized RJ shooting threes a lot. Yes, I have, but I think this is an opportunity now. It's the off season to work on that. During the season when it wasn't falling, I didn't want him shooting threes because it just was not working. He was shooting us out of games. It wasn't working. But now it's the off season. This is your chance to work on that. Get your jump shot right. Figure things out with the 3-point shot. Not saying the guy has to shoot 40% from three. No, just a serviceable amount so that teams can actually respect his 3-point shot. Because when he shoots a three, I can imagine most defenses are not exactly going there going like, oh no, don't let RJ Barrett shoot a three. No, they'd rather him shoot a three than get inside because RJ is much stronger and clearly better at finishing and attacking the rim. So if RJ can improve that shot, his points per game numbers can go up to 22, 23 even if he can really round it out. Not saying that I expect the Knicks to have like 3 point per game scores. That's not going to happen. That's not how basketball works. They're not going to get all the touches in the world. No. But if RJ can, eclipse the 20-point mark at least and, get to like 21, even 22 a game, then the Knicks can have like a legitimate, star trio, but it all just depends on making those adjustments for RJ. Throughout the season, it was RJ's not being aggressive enough. He seemed to tweak that in the playoffs, and it seemed like he finally figured that out. So he's knocked that out the way. Now he needs to work on the outside shot. Be a respectable shooter from outside, even mid-range too, because you don't really see the guy take a lot of mid-ranges. You mostly see him try to take like a really far floater or a really bad post spin. If he can even just shoot some mid-range jumpers or 3-point jumpers, a respectable jumper in any part of the court, I'll take it. We already know how good he is at finishing. We need him, though, to kind of become a respectable shooter from certain parts of the court. That's the way I see it if RJ wants to really improve. Of course, the defense, too, is a big thing. And I know you've highlighted that before, that one of his big things he needs to work on is the defense. And I totally agree with it. I just think, we just need the scoring to be efficient from him, because we were not a high-powered offense in the regular season, even with the fact that Jalen Brunson and Julius Randle averaged at least 24 points a game. We still were not a good offense. We were one of the bottom 10 teams in field goal percentage, 3-point percentage, free throw percentage, all that stuff. So if Barrett can work on those offensive things such as, mid-range jumpers, 3-point jumpers, free throws especially as well. I can't forget to emphasize that. Free throws. Need to get those down as well, of course, but that'll come with, just working on your shot in general. That will come. But the defense too, like I was saying before. Defense needs to be improved as well because the defense that RJ had this season was not good. It was a step back. We knew that RJ was a pretty good defender in the second half of 2021, 2022, and we thought, okay, this guy can really be a good, scoring and defensive two-way threat, right? But he took that step back, and you kind of just saw him as kind of just there, just a decent player, not the star-level player we were hoping he'd be. This is his, prove-it year, really, I see it. If RJ's going to be suiting up in orange and blue next season, it's a prove-it year for RJ. I think it's simple as that. Because if he takes another step back, or if he just plays to the mean again like he did this year, then his spot on the roster might be in peril. What do you think about that?
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. Look, here are 3 metrics the Knicks were, not very good in, right? Defensive rating, they were 19th in the league, right? I didn't know. I was stunned looking at that because I was like, man, this is, Tom Thibodeau-led team, right? You kind of expect that. But in the same vein, the Knicks get killed from 3 in stretches during a game. You're like, okay, now when you start to piece that together, it makes sense. They were better with Josh Hart. So it's not like they were a bad defense when they got Josh Hart. But, they need to improve in that regard. I agree. They were 20th in true shooting percentage in the league, 20th, right? They were not a very efficient offense, as you mentioned. They were the 4th worst team in free throw percentage. Those are 3 things right there the Knicks absolutely need to turn around if they want to go out and try to win a title. Those are 3 things that RJ Barrett was below average at this season, right? So, if you look at all the starters, Quentin Grimes can shoot. Quentin Grimes plays some defense. Can he get a little better? Absolutely. That I don't disagree. Look, He's got to get a little bit better, but I think Grimes is on his way to doing that. Brunson, great shooter, not a great defender, but he's a great shooter. Randall, kind of the same situation, really good offensive player. Round league average of efficiency on high volume. Robinson, great defensive player, a liability on offense, but again, great defensive player. Barrett's the only starter in that group that does not check any of those 3 boxes right now for the Knicks. And if you're looking to upgrade in your starting lineup, why would you sacrifice defense of Robinson if you weren't a great defense last year? Why are you going to sacrifice the high volume shooting from Quentin Grimes if, that's something you struggled with last year? And you're certainly not touching Jalen Brunson. If we want to talk about moving Julius Randle, does Julius Randle get moved before RJ Barrett? I think that's also a fair question to ask, right? I think that would be a little bit unfair to trade the guy to pin it all. The guy who's 2-time All NBA instead of RJ Barrett. I think that's a little bit crazy. And again, you can't pin a team's struggles on just one guy anyways. So that's already crazy. But kind of end of the day, when we're talking about what the Knicks need to improve going forward, right? Barrett has three of the big things. His flaws are three of the big things that Nick struggled with this season. So, I don't think either of us are saying he's terrible. He's got it. He's the worst player in the world or anything like that. But more so like, hey, your flaws are things the Knicks already struggle with. So think of it from a fit perspective. Think of it from a roster construction perspective, right? At some point, the fit is not going to make sense. The fit already kind of doesn't make a lot of sense. It doesn't make perfect sense. So that's when questions arise about your roster spot. And it's unfortunate. I think it's tougher to have this conversation with Barrett because he was the Knicks' number 3 overall pick, right? And I'm not saying that to say, like, if you have an attachment to the Knicks' number 3 overall pick, you're weird, because I think every Knicks fan with any sort of self-respect has some sort of attachment to RJ Barrett as a player, because everyone remembers him getting drafted. Everyone remembers, as you mentioned in 2020, where he looked like he was going to be a great shooter, great defender. He was a second option on a New York Knicks team that was a 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. That was the high point of that career. That was the high point of like, oh my gosh, year 3 is going to be unbelievable, and it hasn't happened for him yet. Can it happen for him? I think it's still in there somewhere, but I think the question's more so just about the roster fit, and I think that's really where my concerns lie. But with that being said, I guess my final point and my final question here that I wanted to kind of bring up when it comes to RJ Barrett is, if you are the New York Knicks, and if RJ Barrett, is able to put together, a good year 5, right? What does that look like for you in terms of like, because I know it's tough to say like he's got to have X, Y, and Z stats, because you can't really quantify defense as well in the NBA as you can, or you can't really qualify defense in general, I feel like, in any sport, but it's going to be hard to quantify that. But what do you think a successful RJ Barrett season looks like in year 5?
Right, so before I get into it, I kind of just want to say I 100% agree with what you were saying about how RJ doesn't really check off all those boxes as to what he excels at. I mentioned before, he's pretty above average at finishing at the rim, but everything else he kind of just either lacks in or is just okay at. He's okay at, like mid-range or post fades, but then three-point shooting, he's below average in. Free throw shooting, he's below average in. The defense, he was just okay. He was a little underwhelming on that side of the floor. So for a good RJ Barrett season in year 5, one, improve the defense, of course. I got to emphasize that because I felt like my last point, I emphasized a lot of offense, but I do need to emphasize the defense because the old saying always goes, offense wins games and defense wins championships. So if RJ can step up the defense, that's one big thing right there. That's a huge step in the right direction. But offensively, if he can just be a respectable scorer. With how inconsistent he would be sometimes from scoring, teams wouldn't respect him when he would want to shoot the ball or when he attacked the basket, because it didn't seem like he was really like, he just couldn't find it. Whatever it was, he just could not find it whatsoever. He could not get a clear shot at the rim. He could not get a clear look, get a good look at the basket, find his stroke from 3. Couldn't have it, right? He didn't have it whatsoever. If he can improve that in the offseason, work with his trainer, he's got a strong work ethic. So I have no doubts in my mind that he will, make proper adjustments. He just has to get it done now, because I think we're starting to run out of time on when will RJ really become like that guy. Because to bring back your 3rd overall pick point, we drafted him 3rd overall to kind of be like the franchise savior, the guy that would turn the franchise around. That guy ended up being Julius Randle instead of RJ Barrett, and in 2020, after we made the playoffs, we got pretty excited, like, oh my god, Julius Randle was this good, and now, RJ Barrett's still developing, and RJ's supposed to be this superstar, so we'll be really set. That hasn't happened yet. We had to go get Jalen Brunson to kind of be like that next co-star next to Randall, because Barrett was still kind of being up and down, and then Barrett had this down season this past season, and it became the question of, okay, does he even fit on this team at all? So it's like he's a big question mark. It's as simple as that. The way to define RJ Barrett for next season, we don't know. It is to be determined completely. It could either go horribly wrong, where he takes another step back in certain parts of his game, or it could go really well, where he takes a huge leap and becomes a really efficient scorer from all 3 levels of the court, and becomes a good defender once again, and becomes the third co-star alongside Brunson and Randall, and we don't need to worry about trading Barrett. We just focus on the fact that he developed and actually, made the proper improvements that he was supposed to make. Of course, like I said, the mid-range shots, the 3-point shots, free throws, defense, all those things. I know I kind of almost made it sound like I named off everything you need to do on the basketball court, but quite frankly, there's really nothing that RJ is like necessarily elite at this point, which is why he kind of needs to make those improvements in almost everything. Like I said, he's above average at scoring at the rim, but that's kind of about it. Everything else, he's either average or below average. And quite frankly, for a third option and for a team that's contending for the finals and you want like a good, third co-star, that's not necessarily acceptable. We need him to be able to excel at least at something. At least at something, whether it's defense, whether it's scoring, something. There needs to be something he excels at. Because if he's kind of just there and, kind of just being like the third option that, is, like I said, just there and kind of just, I guess making a couple shots here and there and playing okay defense, then you're not going to get very far. You're going to be a second round exit consistently. If you want to have a substantial upgrade, it either starts with RJ drastically improving, or if it becomes down to it, moving him for a piece that'll actually make a bigger difference. We don't want to talk about trades too much, of course, because, saying we want to trade a player is never fun. We don't want to always trade away our players, but it's a serious business conversation to have of whether, RJ needs to be moved somewhere else for not only his own development, but for the team. The team is trying to compete for a championship now. We're past the phase now where we're trying to focus on player development. We're past that. We're trying to get to the championship now. I think that needs to be emphasized. This isn't like 2020 or 2019 where, okay, we're just focusing on player development right now. We know we're not competing. No, this team can seriously compete for a championship now. I will firmly believe that. Do I think the Knicks are going to go to the finals next season? I won't full-heartedly say yes, but I do think they can at least, contend for an Eastern Conference Finals appearance. I do think that. I think they're equipped to do it. They just need to make the proper upgrades, and it starts with the in-house players making the proper adjustments, such as RJ Barrett. He's the biggest question mark. So that's kind of just my final thoughts on it. What do you think about all that?
I second everything you say. I think you're spot on. And really the big thing that you mentioned there is that this team is in a different position than they were 2 years ago or even a year ago, right? We got the experimental year with Jalen Brunson. When Jalen Brunson came over here, it was RJ Barrett's finally playing with a real point guard. It hasn't worked out for Barrett so far. So, whether it will work out or not, year 4 is usually a big year. We're past year 4 now. We're entering year 5. Year 5, I don't think we can go in to say, all right, well, what about year 6? It's a year 5. It's kind of do or die for him now. And as you mentioned, when it comes to saying you want to trade a player, that feels like more of a damning statement when it comes to a player than free agency when you just let them go or whatever it may be. When you trade a player, you're saying I can choose to roster you, but I don't want to. When you let a guy walk in free agency, we have to put financial assets into this or that. There are reasons why a player can be let go even if you still want them. But yeah, no, they're going to have to make some tough calls. And again, when it comes to a lot of the guys, again, when we're looking at just the starting lineup in general, RJ's the guy who has to make the biggest adjustments, right? Quentin Grimes could be what Quentin Grimes was last year, really for the rest of his career, and he's going to have a very long NBA career on a lot of teams that are looking to win because he's a 3-and-D guy, and that's always going to be valuable. Obviously, Brunson and Randall, I don't have to say anything about them, and Mitch for the same reasons as Grimes. A defensive-oriented big is always going to be valuable in the NBA. Even in the era of three-point shooting, it's still valuable, right? So, going forward from here on out, we'll have to wait and see, but, I don't know if you have anything else you want to chime in with.
I just want to add one more thing too. For any of you football fans out there, if you guys follow the Giants, of course, we have Fireside Giants, so if you guys want to check that out. But anyways, look at Daniel Jones. I think this is a good comparison here. First 3 years in the league, he was not a good quarterback. It was always, at this point, okay, should the Giants get rid of Daniel Jones? Then in year 4, he kind of had his prove it year. He improved drastically in turnovers. He wasn't turning the ball over a lot. He was being more accurate. He was using his legs more, all that stuff. This isn't a football podcast, but I'm just using it as an example. Made the playoffs, won them a playoff game, earned a contract extension. I'm not saying that this is like the same exact scenario for Barrett because he already did get his extension, so he already got his money. But in terms of whether Barrett were to get traded or not, this is kind of that prove it year. This is a prove it year. It may not be 100% the exact same comparison, but I think in some way it is a little similar. What do you think?
No, I actually 100% agree. I think that's a great point because Daniel Jones, had he not had the season he had, is not a New York Giant. And number 2, people can talk about the whether Daniel Jones is a good quarterback or assistant quarterback or whatever, whether RJ Barrett is good or just a system player really doesn't matter at this point. If RJ Barrett is a product of the Tom Thibodeau system, I don't care. As long as I get the good production I'm looking for, and that's kind of how the Giants feel about Daniel Jones. They don't care if he's a system quarterback or not. If he gives them production they're looking for, that's all that matters, right? And going forward, the Knicks are gonna need RJ Barrett to give them production that they're looking for, because the NBA. Look, you get your extension, yes, but that contract's very tradable, and a lot of teams are gonna, be okay trading for that, even if they don't believe in RJ Barrett, because of how the NBA works. You can't just eat money; you have to match money, you have to match salaries. So RJ Barrett's a great contract to match salaries with. So again, we like RJ Barrett. I think none of us are rooted. We don't have agendas. We want to be right about this or that. We're open to other perspectives. We'd love to hear if you guys disagree with us. We'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comment section below. Maybe you feel like maybe you feel as if RJ Barrett, maybe you think there are things we missed. Maybe there are things that signs of growth that you think you guys saw that we didn't see. Whatever you guys have to say about RJ in the comment section below, we want to hear what you guys have to say. With that being said, you guys can check us out on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and of course this YouTube page. You can listen to the audio version of this podcast on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Please drop us a 5-star rating if you're doing so. And with that being said, you can follow our personal Twitter accounts. They're going to be above our heads. And with that being said, thank you guys again so much for joining us. If you're in New York and you're in that area, stay safe. I'm in New York right now. The smoke is unbearable. And with that being said, again, thank you guys for tuning in. Have a great rest of your day. Peace out.